Yeah, hi. So good afternoon. This is Phil Davis with TowerData. Sam and I are really happy that you've been able to join us for the webinar this afternoon. And again, thanks so much for taking that time. Sam and I have spent a lot of time actually together at various conferences where we both speak. And one of the things we've always talked about is that when you go to a conference, they get a great keynote speaker who comes from a huge brand, and they talk about their email program. And their email program sounds unbelievably complicated and complex, and you realize they have this huge team of people that have put together a great plan, and they do a great job in engagement and creating more personalized messages. And what we want to be able to do is help bring some of those best practices that give great lift to our customers and partners that have a team of one, a team of just a few, or who don't have those same resources but want to take advantage of some of those opportunities. The other thing we've noticed is they don't talk enough about acquisition. So when we talk about getting the most out of our email investment today, we want to be able to start with acquisition and then take you through some really significant opportunities. So what Sam is going to go ahead and take you through the agenda, and then we'll get moving.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. Before Bounce Exchange, I was actually at Living Social, so I was one of those brands that had the huge technology stack to do all of the personalization and pieces like that. But even within there, I think some of the highest value came from the initial pieces we implemented and not from requiring these huge systems. So a lot to what Phil's talking about. There's so many things that you can do right now that will make a big impact that don't require massive investments or technology or anything like that. So the very high level agenda is going to be starting with how do you grow your list. There's the bigger your list is, the more valuable it is. So a lot of email technologies never speak to that, and that's a lot of what we do here at Bounce Exchange, but there are a lot of ways to do that are not directly Bounce Exchange related, of course, as well. Then we'll dive into just understanding who's on your list and really knowing what you should be doing with them. And then the last piece is just above and beyond. What do you do once you have this big, very detailed list of users, and how do you make a lot more money out of that? So the first piece is really what we talk a lot about here at Bounce Exchange, which is how you grow your list in the right way. A lot of people think about email acquisition very generically. It's sort of one size fits all. For the most part, the tools that are available out there are often either just a sidebar, email sign up little box that says sign up for a newsletter, and it's very demanding. It doesn't really explain any value. The other one that we see a lot is as soon as you land on a site, something pops up in the middle of the screen, blocks your entrance, and says, enter your email to see the website. We think both of these are bad for a variety of reasons. First being that you're not really giving any value first to that user. If you're blocked from seeing the website until you enter your email address, you really don't know what's there, especially if it's your first time coming to that site. You don't even know if you want the products. You don't know if the site's any good, if it's a publisher, if the writing is any good, or if it's something you're even interested in. So why would you sign up for an email for something that you don't know anything about? If it's on the right rail, everyone knows there's just banner blindness to everything that's not really clearly labeled on the screen. There's rarely an opportunity to list a value prop of signing up for an email address. Sometimes you'll say get 20% off with your email address, but is that really the value prop there? It's sort of hard to say because you don't know how much you're going to get emailed by these people. You might feel like it's going to be spammy, whatever it is. So we really think about that as a very holistic idea of how do you ask at the right time and how do you ask with the right message. And to speak to who you should ask to and when you should ask, this is kind of an overwhelming slide, but that's kind of an intentional piece to it, is that there are so many different paths that a user can take on the site. They come from different devices. They come from different backgrounds. Maybe some have purchased, maybe some haven't. And trying to identify who's actually likely to sign up for an email address or for an email from your company is really dependent on finding users that should sign up for it. So for example, if you ask everyone who comes to your site to sign up for an email in the first 10 seconds, a very low percentage of people will sign up. And most likely the people, if they feel like they're forced to put in their email, it won't be a very high quality email address. But if you look at users who have seen 4 page views, they're clearly very engaged in the brand, and they're very likely to give you an email address. And we've seen that with a lot of our testing where it's 5 to 6x the rate if you wait until they've seen a few page views. It sort of goes hand in hand with it. It might be a little bit smaller pool, but it's again speaks to the quality as well as just the interest in the brand that gets there. And I think Phil has a lot of what we've talked about in the past is when you get that email address, how do you know it's actually a good email address? Which Phil, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of it depends just on how you get the email address, but what we think is a really good idea before you upload that email to your ESP and you start pushing email against it, it's really to make certain that you've got a great email address and you put it through a validation engine. Many validation engines immediately will look at that syntax of the email and can help flag for poor syntax, but they'll also be able to look at the domain of the email to see if the domain accepts mail. They'll be able to even ping it against SMTP server to be able to see if it actually results in a confirmed deliverable email. So it's really important whether you're collecting your email online as part of the capture form, or we even see many clients who capture their email at the cash register and they've been sent to stores based on how many emails they collect, and often those will be fat-fingered. So really important to immediately make sure that email is clean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not 100% sure what the makeup of the audience here is, but at Bounce Exchange, we've seen that to be really important on the B2B side. We ask for an email address before showing any demos, and oftentimes people just want to see that video, or they want to pass the demo video around and enter really crappy fake email addresses, which is understandable. It's sort of human nature. But we want to make sure that when we're actually sending our own marketing emails out, that we're not getting caught in spam traps because of all of those crappy emails that came through. So it really matters a lot on just the B2B side as well. And then a little bit more just as kind of a fun example of the types of things that we think about for how you ask for the email address is, what is the value of this business? What is the value of giving your email address? Why should you sign up? On the left here you see just it's more of a demand. Sign up for our email list and tell me who you are. That's fine, and asking at the right time could be fairly successful. But if you think about your company as a whole and what is the real value prop that you're providing, and this is actually an example for Tom's Shoes, and their model is for every one purchase, they give one to charity. So saying, do you agree with our core value as a company? And just getting someone to engage in that value to say, yes, I do agree. And then it's not, the call to action isn't sign up or send me emails. It's join the movement, be a part of what we're doing. And that really helps engage people in the right way and helps them understand that it's not just about maybe a generic promo list or anything like that. So coming next, this is mostly the Phil side.
Yeah. So now that you've captured and acquired those emails, you want to be able to really understand that user behind the email. And so I'm going to give you a little more details about validating the email address and talking about how to make sure you have a complete user profile on your user. So again, you hit the start button as you're getting started. You want to start with that clean email address. And so, here at TowerData, where we really build solutions for email marketers, we thought hard and long about how to make this process as easy as possible. Our clients take advantage of our service through an API, so they're able to get real-time validation of every email as they collect that email, so they could take advantage and get triggers out right away to that clean email address. And through the API, the things that we're going to be able to do for you to make certain that asset that you collect can be really used for many different ways is, again, we're going to look at the syntax of that email address, make sure it's accurate. In fact, we have technology that can correct fat-fingered keying issues associated with the syntax. So maybe they left out a dot before the com, there's no O between com, Gmail has 2 Gs, things like that. We'll recognize that and we'll be able to correct those. Additionally, we really are going to make sure that domain accepts email. We also are going to bounce it and flag it for what we call toxic emails, constant complainers, potential spam traps, email addresses that look real but that are really going to hurt the performance of your list. And finally, we are going to do an SMTP ping and return back results so that you can see which of your emails are good emails, which are clearly bad, and then there's going to be some gray area where the email has all the indications that it looks like a good email, but you couldn't completely confirm it, and therefore with the variety of codes that we send back to you, you're going to make some decisions on how you want to proceed. But the goal here is through that real-time mechanism to give you a very quick, very significant amount of information about that email address. So you got that clean email address. Now you want to be able to understand who that user is behind that email address, right? And really what we are all about, and we really think it's important as we start to get to examples, is being able to find the data you can so you can make a great first impression. Because the consumer just gave you an email address. So they're not going to be surprised to get something from you. And if you give them a good first impression right out of the gate, right, they're more likely to engage with your email in a longer, more and pay better attention to you when you're in that crowded inbox. If you give them a terrible experience or an experience that's just like looks like everybody else's, you might not stand out. And so the way to stand out is think about the data you can have at your fingertips right away. So there's some first-party data that you'll have available to you and third-party. Sam, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the first-party data that you see your clients picking up, and then I'll continue with some third-party data options.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll actually speak back a step a little bit. In terms of validating your list and all of the sort of advanced pieces that go into that, going back to what we were saying at the very beginning of this, it is something that we actually do at Bounce Exchange, not through the API, just because of the way our business is set up and the way our inbound leads come in. We do it in a batch every, I guess like twice a month or something like that. And that's only to say that it's actually really easy to take your list and make sure it's clean every once in a while, whatever's right for the company, depending on how quickly it's growing, how much you're emailing, all of those different pieces. And like we get our list over to TowerData and we have the return with cleaned email addresses in like, an hour or something like that. And that's incredibly easy. There's no setup, everything like that. So that's one very actionable thing I think is important that I know Phil's not trying to pitch, but that we've done a few times. It's been great. In terms of first-party data, at Bounce Exchange we talk a lot about behavioral indicators and what that says about the user. So how those layer into that whole profile can be really meaningful. Obviously things like purchase history and site visit frequency are going to tell you a lot, especially if you have a way to capture that and understand it. If it's on purchase history, one thing that's very simple to start with is have they purchased, yes or no. You probably want to show more promotions to people who have not purchased than those that have. If they're clearly a very loyal purchaser, you probably want to show them, maybe you might want to show them very special promotions that are VIP, anything like that. Engagement on the email and the site. Are they a one and done kind of user? Are they someone who clicks and opens every email? And actually, for us at Bounce Exchange, we're tracking every click on the site in our database. And we can use that to understand not just on the user, but a general behavior that applies to a larger segment. So we can group people and say that people that click through this typical path are interested in these things. And we can leverage that in terms of how we want to market to those people in particular.
Excellent. And then, what's great about that first-party data, you understand the behavior of that consumer when they're coming in. However, when you can marry it with some important third-party data, specifically some of the demographic data, you're going to be able to understand the context with which that behavior took place. And so, again, we offer about 35 fields that we can deliver through an API experience or in batch. And if you get it through the API or in batch, either way is fine, but the API is going to give you that real-time return of the data. And our top selling fields, before this I had run an agency where we ran email programs, and the top fields that I saw my clients using across industry when it came to consumer marketing was age, gender, location, marital status, presence of children, homeowner status, and income. So, for instance, if you then see that somebody has spent a lot of time hovering over a product, which Bounce Exchange was able to do, and specifically was looking at, a designer collectible necklace, and now you want a message to them, knowing that they're a married male between age 30 and 40, will allow you to tailor the message appropriately based on the context in which they were probably looking at this necklace. Instead of assuming that you want to show them earrings that would look good on them or women's shoes, you might talk in terms of the ease of buying gifts, of some of the other benefits that you might be able to deliver. So context around behavior is real important to creating that amazing first impression. And so we offer at TowerData the opportunity to get third-party data through an API or in batch that allows you to marry with that first-party data and make some great, really great insights around your customers. And what we'll see is some clients will take those and put those into engines, algorithm engines, predictive modeling engines that will allow them to make those insights. Others, they don't have that access to those teams, or they don't want to plug in another solution. They can even just look at simplifying based on one or two attributes. And so really a great opportunity here as you talk about the third-party data. So let's talk a little bit next now about what you can do with those emails. And I was sort of getting you in there. As you think about somebody using advanced algorithms versus somebody just building a list, it begins to get you to think about kind of stages of personalization. So we'll talk about some stages in personalization, some types of triggered messages, and then while it might seem kind of like an advanced topic, one of the things we want to really make certain that everyone leaves here is when they collect an email address, that hashed email is an incredibly powerful data field. So powerful enough that at TowerData we've chosen to build our entire business centered around the email address because we believe it's so important. So let's start with talking about the stages of personalization. And really, if you think about the personalization continuum, right? Many of us, when we first started experiencing email marketing and was getting our first email or building our first email programs, it was kind of a batch and blast mode. It was at mass marketing, and great, mass marketing is still wonderful for a street sign, for a magazine. I'm not sure if anyone's looking at billboards anymore. I think everyone's probably looking at their smartphone while they're driving. But mass marketing really, it gives you, the goal there is maximum exposure, right, with one message, but it can have very low impact on your email. And so the one thing, if there's anything that we can drive home today, it's if any of you are doing batch and blast emails, try to do one thing differently to get away from that, to move yourself up the stages of personalization. So often what we do is we talk about the one-to-one, which is great. It speaks directly to the consumer. Every email is a little different. You can build trust and engagement, have a nice impact. However, it takes a lot of technical tools. It takes a larger team. It takes maybe more developers in order to build out those types of programs. And so don't be intimidated by feeling like you have to get to one-to-one to have impact. Many of our clients can get tremendous impact through messaging by segments. It allows you to cluster your audience into different buckets and appeal to each of those groups of people, groups of clusters in a more engaged way. and you'll get significant lift from the mass appeal. So let's take you through maybe an example of segmentation.
Sure, and I think that also applies on the acquisition side, just to hop in on it. And this is, a lot of sites, if they're selling men's clothing versus women's clothing, if you're asking for an email and they're looking at men's clothing, it should be tailored to that site, part of the site. A lot of sites have very different products. Making sure that the value prop is tied to what they're looking at is a really clear piece of segmentation, just obviously based on pretty much the URL that the user's on.
Right. I think, Sam, that's a good point. Not only the website, not only the email, but as they're clicking through the email and the landing experience, trying to match that all up. And so that's a great point and a great tip. So here's a sample of segmentation. And so many of you probably get a daily deal, get an offer through a daily deal at some point in your life. You might continue to get them. Many of you may have opted out at some point and tried another one. And one of the interesting things, the challenges of running a daily deal company is that as an email marketer, they have to promote the offers that they have in that day. And so as you've noticed, if you're like me, you've signed up for a daily deal and you suddenly get a spa offer. Now, none of you know me very well, but I'm not a spa guy. There's the likelihood of me getting a mani-pedi is pretty limited. It's actually hard for me to even say the words mani-pedi. But I continue when I sign up for many of these sites, test them out. The first offer is going to be a mani-pedi or a spa experience. Well, we worked with a top daily deal company, and we did a test. We actually segmented based on gender and marital status. And what you'll see is a woman received a typical offer that said, "Tired of holiday shopping, you deserve your spa day." And they had the appropriate image tied to the cluster that we chose for them and the appropriate content. Same exact offer went to married men, the segment of married men, but we shifted the messaging. And actually, the messaging was written a little wittier than it is here, but we couldn't fit it all on our slide. But look for ways to show your wife just how much they mean to you. And what we saw was a significant lift in the click-through rate by doing something as simple as creating the cluster married man. And it's unbelievable when you take that through your entire when you start to add and segment one more time and one more time, you keep getting the lift. Another example that's not here, when I was with the agency, we worked with a diet site, and one of the things that we did was we used age, gender, some self-prescribed information that we received as they registered, and we automatically drop them into one of 20 different drip campaigns. And then those drip campaigns were very specific to the right user. We had algorithms built in to move them from one campaign to the other if they behave differently. But the first process, which was the very first thing we did, was actually a pretty simple build. Didn't require mass amount of technology. It required us to write 20 different storyboards and tell 20 different stories. And we got tremendous lift. It was a great program, and it wasn't that difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming from a daily deal history, even just speaking to this example again specifically, the difference in the email on the left and moving towards this male plus married status, that's probably, thinking back, it would probably be something like 15% of the email list. So even if you're just sending 85% of people one email and then you have this high value cluster that you can grab and send them something else that you think makes more sense for them, it can make a big impact. And it's a templated email. It's just about dropping in a different picture, pushing it to a different landing page, and changing a couple sentences of copy. It's high impact with not a lot of work. Maybe an extra hour or so of someone's time just to really nail it down. And the next piece we want to talk to is talking about triggered emails. Another layer of segmentation that fits in across all of these is not only do you need to know what you're filling the email with, but when and how you're sending it can make a huge impact. And this is two emails that are actually based on two separate triggers that Bounce Exchange registers. Triggered email platforms, there's actually more and more of the standard ESPs out there have triggers built in, which is great. And I think that will be a trend that continues to really accelerate. The difference here is that one, someone added something to the cart, and then the other, someone didn't add anything to the cart. Both of these users were on the site, and they were engaged enough that the system determined that we should send them more or send them something. Usually for us, we say something like they've looked at 4 separate products, and in the same 20-minute session is usually what we're looking at there. And then we'll say if they don't come back within 30 minutes or an hour, we'll test that time frame, what makes sense for the brand. We'll send them a message to re-engage them. Again, this can require a little bit more technology, but there's more and more out there that really is built in as a baseline. And then from here, I think when we start talking about hash emails, as Phil was speaking to before, it's really the way that you can identify your customer across the whole web. And I think, Phil, you have probably a lot more to say than I do here, but it's
Sure.
an incredible tool to re-engage more than just within your own site or on your own email list.
So you've worked hard to get this email address, an email address, and what we want to make certain is you recognize that power of the hashed email. Not only can you upload a hashed email, say, into many social media sites in order to run advertisements specifically to that user, you can also use it to kind of connect experiences across in-store, multiple devices. Really, it becomes the fingerprint of your customer. And it gives you the opportunity to really understand their behavior across devices, and it's really important, especially for those of you trying to figure out attribution, but more importantly for those of you trying to build a more complete profile of your user. The thing you want to remember is no one makes an online purchase without an email address. You take that one step further. The first thing you do when you buy a device, you register using that email address. So it's really important to understand the power of the hash email and how you can use it to connect to the consumer across all sorts of experiences. So we want to bring that out. We want you to be able to think about your email asset beyond just the email campaign. You can now use that email to enable more targeted display. You can use that email perhaps even to recognize when a customer comes back into your store, and be able to give people a much better experience. So really important. Think about the email that you have. Think about what you can do with it. But that hashed email is tremendously powerful.
Yeah, and actually to plug something totally unrelated to our businesses, there's a tool out there, I think, I haven't used it in a while, but I believe it's called Spruce Mail. I'll have to look it up. But what they do is they're able to take your email that you're sending out as a promotional message and automatically prompt you to turn that into a Facebook ad that goes to everyone on your email list. So they use that hashed email, that unique identifier, to find all those people on Facebook, and you're actually showing the exact same promotion you just emailed everyone about. It's a really lightweight, easy way to do it. It ends up being, it's not a ton of impressions because it has to see those people on Facebook as well. It's not a blast, but it's highly targeted and usually pretty affordable and pretty high return, at least for a display ad side of the business.
Right. And on a secondary note, one of the things that we also can help our clients with is we work with a number of clients who have built large postal lists, but they don't have the email, and we can help them tie those postal addresses and the people who live at those homes. We can help them target them with display on Facebook, in Twitter, by using the connections that we've built here at TowerData. So another option.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just sort of a general wrap-up slide. I know we have a couple questions we definitely want to get to here as well. So also, please, anyone feel free to push in a few more. I think we'll have time for a couple more to come in if anyone's interested. But the final note that I want to emphasize, and I know Phil's on the same page here, is that I think a lot of people do a few of the things that we've been talking about, but what we've seen is that if you're able to do them all or a large combination of them, they really impact each other and support each other. So it's sort of a multiplied benefit the more you're able to do along these lines.
Absolutely. I mean, so everyone on every single person's probably on this call, and every email marketer I ever met wants a bigger list. And frankly, you want a bigger list as long as it's giving you quality data, so you make sure that you have validated the email address. And you shouldn't do anything without getting to know the user behind that email address. So get that intelligence behind it and collectively see huge value. So why don't we take questions, and then our last two slides here will have our contact information. And so it's real easy to, we're pretty easy to find though. And we will also be making this recording available relatively shortly and send it out to people who were listening. So let's go ahead and take a few questions at this point. I think someone's going to read a few questions off to us.
Thanks, Sam.
And if you have,
we did get a...
I'm sorry, and if you have questions, continue to keep asking through chat.
Absolutely. We did get a few questions while you all were presenting. The first is, we're an app company. How should we balance the call to action of downloading the app or getting an email? App downloads are most important to us rather than email because we usually get email on sign up.
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that probably pretty strongly. We have a lot of clients, Bounce Exchange, that are really their key KPI is downloading the app. It's not getting that email address primarily. And a lot of the same principles apply though. It's really being clear about what the value prop is for actually putting the app on your phone. If it's a pure app company, the advertising is probably based purely on landing pages as well as display. I know a lot of that goes on Facebook. So number one, if you can be really clear about the value props that you're saying and the reasons to get the app, that we've seen that help a lot. Copy is part art, part science, but what we see over and over again is that if you go from iteration 1 to iteration 5, you can see a 10 to 20% lift, no problem. So that's a big part of it. The other side of it too is if you do have landing pages, you actually still can build an email list that's related to it. What we do is a lot of times if someone doesn't complete the key KPI on page, on e-commerce that might be making a purchase, could be for certain businesses driving app download. If the user doesn't do that, what's the next valuable action they could take? Well, that's most likely just to grab their email so that you can continue to market and remarket to them. So as they leave the page, what we can allow you to do is serve another request that says, hey, why don't we just exchange contact information, and then we can get in touch with updates about the business, whatever's the right prop there, value prop there. And that's a way that you can actually balance both of those pieces.
Absolutely. And I think I'm going to reiterate, one of the things that I love about Bounce Exchange is back before before tools like Bounce Exchange, and I'm going back a while, back in the agency days, we struggled with this exact question. And so often the solution was a two-part process where we would capture an email address in part 1 to make sure we had it, and then part 2 was the rest of the information for the download. Sometimes we went the other way, and this eliminates that need. It allows you to go for your first call to action, and then if they're abandoning that call, then they will be given the opportunity to provide less information and get that email address. Again, it's all about how much value you can show them for the action they're taking. And the email allows you to message to them the value over time if you can't get the immediate download.
right? For sure. And just to reemphasize it, it's so much is about being clear what the value prop is. If you fall back to get the app so you can engage with our brand more, it's not really going to entice people to do it. If it's get the app for exclusive access to something, for something maybe it's geolocated so that you can be really tailored with the information you're providing based on where you are. Whatever it is, that's the reason to use that app rather than to go to your site. If you have both, or if it's just what's the true value of that across the board is really key there. And if you can have an email list that's, you would have a separate list of captured email addresses that are non-app downloaders, then you have a whole new channel to actually push them to download the app through whatever value props you are, whatever drip series you want to put in place.
Great. Our next question is, what are your thoughts for list building and buying lists based on a certain target customer? Is it worth it?
Sam, why don't I jump on that first, and then you could probably share from some of the other experiences. But what you're talking about is going out and buying a list of email addresses, upload it into your ESP, and trying to get deliverability. Number one, you should look at your ESP contract. It probably prohibits you from doing that. Number two, the performance on those lists are going to be very, very poor. Those are consumers who have no experience with your brand. They don't know why they got your email. They're not expecting it. And it just looks like noise in the inbox if you're lucky enough to get in the inbox. And then third, if you do this at scale, you run the risk of actually hurting your online reputation enough to getting blacklisted. So given those three comments, I would say I'm not recommending you do that. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree. The key point to me being that those users haven't said that they're interested in receiving those emails, which is just so key for engagement. Even if it is a quality email address, that just matters a lot. I would say on a related note, though, a lot of email acquisition is around buying the email address, but it's less direct than that. So if you're providing maybe a more aggressive discount to get that email address, that's one way to do it. And it is buying it, but it's not as direct as just going and buying a list that has no idea who your brand is. So, maybe it is doing some test display buying and offering a strong discount to sign up for an email. Sign up for an email, get 20% off. Sign up for an email, get X free with your order, or whatever it is. That can be a strong prop. And again, it also gets them to directly engage. It's not sneaking them onto your list.
Exactly.
The next question is there a perfect frequency of emails for converting sales for an e-commerce subscription delivery service? For example, once a week or once a day, etc.
That's like a debate that email marketers love to have. There's no one answer. It depends a little bit on your brand and on your messages. I think that parts of your list can tolerate greater frequency than others. And I believe it's important to test out different frequencies, frankly, and see what the impact is on your metrics. Are your opens and clicks going down with greater frequency? There's going to be a point where they will, but I would suggest that you can test that out, and then, frankly, through some automation, people who engage more with you will have an opportunity to send more to them. And so, don't think of the list as this one static list. Start to understand who's engaging with you, who's not engaging with you. And then more importantly, it's about the value you have. Are you pitching, every time, is it buy, buy, buy? Is that your only message? Are you trying to stay top of mind? And having your message be a softer sell might allow you to send greater frequency and stay top of mind. So those are some of my thoughts. There's no really one answer. Frankly, it's a great way, this is a great place to test, and that's what I would suggest. Sam, do you have any other thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of echoing a lot of what you're saying. If you're able to set up any triggers, those they're related to frequency, but sometimes they fall outside of it just because it's so relevant to what the user did or is doing that maybe if they have just clicked on opened the app and then they didn't order, or they came to the site and started checkout, didn't complete it, that's going to be a highly relevant email to someone at the exact time that matters. And you could send an email every day. It might make sense to, if you have a lot of what Phil was saying, if you have a value prop every day. If it's Monday's deal is this, Tuesday's deal is this, or there's something along those lines. If you're saying the same thing over and over again, even if it's in different words, people will get sick of it. I do think people have a relatively high tolerance these days for marketing emails. Not that many people unsubscribe that aggressively. But if you aren't providing value, you aren't showing anything relevant, they will get annoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say secondly, just to make sure, we're a B2B marketer, right? Here at TowerData, our goal is to find marketers that want to buy things from us. And so we're marketing to B2B marketers, to marketers who are used to marketing. And nothing performs better than our triggered emails. So if someone does something on our website, it triggers off a response. Those are the most highly engaged emails.
Related to frequency, we do have a question about the best time to email my list. And you all went over the triggered emails and sending emails when it's most relevant. But is there a certain time of day that's most appropriate or most effective?
So what's interesting about that question, what is the best time of day to send my list? The first thing I would say is you're going to want to stop thinking about your emails sends as a list. As you move up the continuum of personalization from a blast to one-to-one, that notion is going to slowly go away. And so how can you, if you have a million records, say the best time is 10 a.m. Eastern? Is that the best time for everybody in your list? Is it the best time for some people in your list? So what I would suggest is that as you're mailing, there are going to be better and better tools, and there already are good tools, to understand when an individual is engaging, so that as you set up a campaign, that campaign will be delivered based on that individual's engagement behavior. So, there is no best time. So
yeah.
That's one thing to think. And Sam, if you want to add a little to that.
I would just say to when you're looking at that, as you start to evaluate it, if it is important to you to really dive into the best time for an email, be careful of self-fulfilling data. If it looks like your engagement is the highest at 10 a.m., but you send your email at 8 a.m., then that doesn't mean that sending your email at 10 a.m. is the solution. It just means that people engage with it within the first 2 hours of you sending. So just to be careful with those kinds of tests to make sure you aren't just assuming that data is saying something along those lines. Yeah, I would also say that a lot of it is experiment. A lot of it is also, when I've done tests around it, has to do with just changing things up. If you send an email every Wednesday at 8 a.m. and then you switch that to Tuesday at 5 p.m., you might see that the engagement increases a lot for the first couple of weeks of doing that, and then it falls back down towards the norm. So that could just be enough argument to say keep testing and keep it interesting, and try not to just be too static, and always, of course, the relevancy side of it comes into play.
Yeah, and in all frankness, we've discussed this. There's been panels. You could listen to an hour-long panel, and you're going to get no specific answer. So I think it's about keeping it fresh, and I believe in 5 years we won't talk about that. Our machine will automatically optimize the time based on each individual.
Thank you. And our last question is, I don't have much data about my email addresses. How do I start moving towards segmentation and personalization with limited resources and data?
Yeah. I'll jump on that again. So number one, that's one of the things that's kind of one of the solutions that TowerData solves. We've built a way for you to get a few fields tied to an email address right away. I would say you want to start with a few fields, and that's it. You'll get huge lift if you segment on gender. You get huge lifts if you compare, depending on your product, you change it from gender to gender and age, or depending on what you're selling. But use a few fields and just get started. And also, you're getting a fair amount of information about how the person got into your website. You might know what keyword they clicked on that got them to your site, then got them to your registration. Look to see what hidden first-party data you also have. And when you marry those, keep it simple. Don't make it so complicated that you'll never get started, and get started. And start with 2 fields, right? And then add 2 more, then add 2 more, and eventually you're going to be unbelievably personalized.
Yeah, a lot of what we were saying before, just do 2 segments on an email and test it and see what happens. Pick out a group, and maybe you want to do a hashed match on Facebook and run a display campaign against those. Just try to figure out those little pieces where you think there are a lot of valuable users. Maybe it's just the top 10% of your purchasers, and send them something specific and see what happens there. Maybe that actually is 80% of the revenue that you're going to see from any email blast, and that might mean that you want to do something totally different with them as you go forward. It's just start testing those little pieces. Some of it will be that gender or third-party data, as Phil's talking to, and some of it might be that purchase data, or maybe it's just based on how much they engage with the emails.
That's all the questions that we have for now, gentlemen.